Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Collective podcast, where we bring you real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. I'm your host, Sasha Calavoda, and I believe that you can stand on your own 2 feet, but that you don't have to do it alone. I love learning from people who continually strive to raise the bar, to go against mainstream thinking, and who dare to question the general consensus. People who risk being ridiculed or even risk the loss of their professional status as they bravely question the common narratives and challenge the rest of us to expand our minds and to reconsider what we think we already know. Join me in learning how to take control of your health and your mind so that you can have the energy to think more clearly and the confidence to step up and take responsibility for all aspects of your life. We promise to never censor here because I believe you are strong enough to hear the real, raw truth to make up your own mind. If you like what you find here at the Sovereign Collective podcast, then please share with your friends and family. I so appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And now, on to the show. Hey everyone, here we are for another interview for the Sovereign Collective podcast, and we are going to be covering a topic that I've been wanting to do for a couple years on this podcast, which I have not been able to do. So my guest today is Tanya Verquin and her cat in the background, and we're going to be covering the topic, or she is going to be covering the topic of German new medicine. Something that I think everybody needs to know about. And the more that I go down the path of truth and healing and freedom and choices and taking responsibility, we really need to know that we've got it all right here. The body knows, the body's wise, and our modern practices has led us far, far, far away from that. So Tanya's here to help us today to understand truly how much control we have, and through that insight, we can remove some of the fears that we have around our symptoms and our so-called diseases and things like that, and really start looking into deeper layers of our life for true lasting healing. She is the podcast host of her own podcast called Pixelated Perspectives that I've been listening to. That has been really, really great. And Tanya, I was looking you up today. You're also an amazing watercolor artist. Holy cow. Check her out. Well, we'll get you the links on that later in the show notes, and Tanya can talk about that at the end. But holy cow, Tanya is an accomplished and amazing artist, and she has some really, really beautiful work out there, and she teaches it apparently too. So we're going to get into all things GNM, about how Tanya got into it and some really basics up first. And then we're going to get into some more of the questions I've been dying to ask personally to somebody who's an expert in this area, and then some other things, but we cannot do it justice in one episode. So Tanya has already agreed to come back for more, because I think there's a lot of places that we can go to with this content, because we have a lot of things. People have a lot of things these days. And it's just my mission these days to just help you know how much control that you actually have over the course of your life and your health. So Tanya, thank you so much for joining me today. And before we got to talk to you, sorry, one more thing. I'm going to say some things that I never do because I never plug my own stuff. So people, a couple things. If you are enjoying this podcast, number one, please go leave a review on iTunes or wherever else you're listening to this podcast, because that really helps me. And eventually one day I'd like to dedicate a lot more time to putting this content out, because I love it. I get amazing feedback from everyone. So I know a lot of people are seriously enjoying this podcast. So please just do me a favor, if you wouldn't mind, and leave me a review. Second of all, if you go to my podcast website, which is sovereigncollective.org, and you go to the store page, a store or shop, something like that, I have some really amazing products there that are available to you at a discount, like Nadine Artemis's products, like some EMF, the EMF Rocks products. There's some homeopathic classes that are really well priced. There's some medicinal mushrooms and tonic herbs, and all of that through my affiliates helps just a little bit to support this. And I'd really love to see that grow. So you benefit, I benefit, and it's win-win. So please check that out as well. And now, sorry, back to Tanya and her cat. And
yes, Oliver.
Oliver. And we are going to get into Germany medicine. So Tanya, thank you so much for carving the time out to spend with me today. And let's get to it.
Thank you, Sasha. It's exciting to be here. I'm happy to be on your podcast. I love it. I've been listening to several episodes over the last couple of weeks, and it's fantastic. You bring on such amazing guests, and I'm all about freedom too. Live in sovereign and German new medicine, Germanic healing knowledge. It's all about health freedom. If you
Right.
know this, you really can't live without health freedom.
Right. And that's the thing. And so two of my highest values are health and freedom. And if you don't own your health, you will not be free. Somebody else is going to own that, right? So that's what I love about the German new medicine. It's just, it's in me. It's in me to
Mhm.
heal. But a lot of people don't want to go there. A lot of people, they're attached to their symptoms, they're attached to their story. So that's the challenge for a lot of people. But for those who care and those who want to know, here we go. So
Yes.
how did German new medicine come into your life? Where did that all start for you?
I learned German New Medicine, or was introduced to it, back in 2011 by Carolina Markelin. She's from Austria, and that was when she was still coming over to Canada and to the major cities and teaching this body of knowledge of Dr. Hamer's. And so that's where I was introduced. My brother, who you've met, they recently at that time had opened up their health food store, and so they had contacts, and Carolina was one of them. And they were telling me about this class that was going to be in Calgary, and of course I'm like, yeah, let's go. I've always been into like learning and just wanting. It was all about freedom. My value too, one of the top ones, is freedom as well. So I was 100% in. Didn't know what the heck I was going to learn, really. I knew it was something to do with these laws that we are living under. And so from that week on, it was a 4-day long seminar, and my life changed after that, Sasha, in a way that, not in a way that I had really serious health complications, but it made everything that I had suffered up until that point make sense. I was able to connect the dots. So I grew up as a kid that always had stomach issues, not debilitating or anything, but they were there. They were annoying. I had mono for that was a few months of really intense sickness. And then I always struggled with muscle skeletal issues, so stiff neck. And so while I couldn't really pinpoint why these certain things after that week, it was very clear to me what was going on, and that it's it was not just my body dysfunction or malfunctioning in any way. And the really neat thing about learning it when I did is that my family was very young. So at that time, our children were just 3 and 5, and then my stepdaughter was 10. And so getting to kind of bring them up with this new paradigm, and it's a new language, because no longer are we using the terms sickness and illness and disease. It was just a complete shift. My husband, it was a lot harder to get him on board. It was, and still after a decade, there's still things where we want to revert back into old paradigms, but really it's allowed my family and I to live with a health freedom, and that has been game changing, because when certain events like 2020 come along, you're not pulled into that fear, right? You're not pulled into the propaganda and that messaging, and it's truly life changing.
Right. And that idea of contagion, right? Like just driving a few blocks today, just woman walking by herself on the street with a mask on, right? That is fear. That is fear
Mhm.
right there. So the idea of this contagion, this is a big thing that this will also bust, right? This is what everyone's like, oh, they caught this, they caught this. The idea of catching something, right?
Mhm.
Catching something is so prevalent in our society. And now I hear it more than ever. Even before, I don't know, I'd still maybe say that, but I can't even say that anymore, right? It's just not even something like you said, it's a new language.
Mhm.
You hear that and you know how incorrect that is and how that makes you such a victim. I caught it. I had it didn't have a choice. It puts you in that victim state when really this is all about empowering and understanding the strength of
Yes.
the body.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the story about how Germany medicine came to be. Where did it all come from? Because it's relatively new speaking. Like,
Yeah, back in 1979, it all started in 1978. Dr. Hammer is a German, traditionally trained medical doctor, and his son was, I'm going to say accidentally, but I think there's more to it than that, but he was shot and killed. And he was on vacation, so on a boat, and he was shot and later passed away from his injuries in Dr. Hamer's arms. And so I think it was like 3 months later, Dr. Hamer developed testicular cancer. And, you know, being a healthy man, never with serious problems before that, he immediately knew. He was like, there's no way this is a coincidence. Like he knew that there was some relation to what he just had gone through, this profound loss, and his development of testicular cancer. Now, at that time in his life, Dr. Hamer was actually a head internist of a cancer clinic in Munich. And so he was working with cancer patients himself. And so he decided to ask his patients. He basically interviewed them one at a time, and we're talking hundreds of patients. And he wanted to find out, like him, had they suffered some sort of traumatic event, something sort of unexpected event prior to their diagnosis. And Sasha, without exception, every single one of them shared their personal take on what they had subjectively perceived. And yes, everybody without exception had in fact suffered something. And so that was profound in itself, but that wasn't enough. That didn't explain to him, well, why was it testicular cancer for him, and why was this gentleman lung cancer, or this woman ovarian cancer. And so at the time too, there was a brand new technology. This diagnostic technology was the CT scan, the computer tomography. And so he decided to get brain scans of all of his patients, including himself, because no one up until that time had actually worked with the brain, knowing that, okay, if the brain is the control center for our organs and our bodily functions, well, why hasn't anybody yet examined, is there a correlation from the psyche, someone's subconscious mind, and how they perceive, so their emotional content, with the diseased organ? And so this was the next step that no one had done, and so Dr. Hamer did. And again, is remarkable results that everyone who shared the same type of cancer, there was actual measurable lesion in the brain that showed up on the CT scan that he later called the Hamer focus. And it was always in the exact same area in every single person who shared the same type of cancer. Now, it all started with just cancer research, but later through the years, Dr. Hamer, this accompanied and really was established these laws that include every known disease in medicine, including psychosis. So these discoveries, they stemmed from Dr. Hamer's profound loss, this very tragic incident. But this is what Dr. Hamer was able then to provide for humanity, was these laws, which basically allow us health freedom on every level.
And 100% of the time. That's what's amazing, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Like nothing is 100% out there nothing. So that in itself is quite remarkable. So you mentioned the laws. So there's 5 biological laws.
Yeah.
What are those biological laws?
Okay, so in a nutshell, we can go through these in a nutshell. They are pretty complex, but we'll go through them really, on the surface level generically, and you'll get an idea of how profound these laws are, and get understanding that these laws are like the law of gravity. Like they apply to everyone. They don't apply just sometimes, or just to some people or some animals. They are applicable no matter what across the line. This is why they are laws. And it wasn't something that Dr. Hamer created. These were just discovered, just like the law of electricity was discovered, right? They've always been there. They've always been working in nature, as nature, but it took someone to discover these. So the first biological law is what Dr. Hamer really called the iron rule of cancer, which explained the cause. So it is the linchpin of any cause. And it basically says that any so-called disease, what conventional medicine terms as a disease or malfunction, is really a special biological program of nature created at the time of an unexpected conflict shock. And it's all to assist the person or animal to cope with that conflict, or to survive the conflict. So nature has taken care of it. It's built, and our systems are endowed with these laws to help us in unexpected crises, in moments of trauma, in moments of threat, when we are literally at threat or figuratively in threat. Our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference. So for a lot of us humans and ailments that we have, it's always a figurative threat that we have perceived, but and not literal like it is in nature. So the first law is that a disease is initiated from an unexpected complex shock. And Dr. Hamer called that a DHS, named after his son, Dirk Hamer. So a Dirk Hamer syndrome. So this means it's something that catches you off guard, that you couldn't have been prepared for, you couldn't have foreseen coming. So Dr. Hamer couldn't have been prepared for a gunshot to his son. And it's isolated felt, right? This is happening to you. It's not anybody else. This is you. And it's dramatic. It's highly acute traumatic. So these are the three criteria that constitute a DHS, or a conflict shock. And once someone has this, so for Dr. Hamer, for his example, his son, it was a profound loss. What happens is there's three levels. The individual really is made up of the psyche, the brain, and the organs, and that cannot be separated. It's one synchronized unit. And this is the only really body of work that really sees it in that way, and that really studies it and views an individual from that way, are the laws of nature. But in that moment of a DHS, of a conflict shock, the brain, the psyche, and the organ is all affected at the same time. Now, by affected, I mean it's all impacted. So at the level of the organ, of the brain, you're going to have that instant ring formation that if you were to get a CT scan right after the event, you would see that measurable Hamer focus in the brain. The psyche is impacted by, you are now obsessively thinking about the conflict, and you can't stop thinking about it, and you can't sleep, and you're not eating. So this is the level of the psyche. And the level of the organ, this is when our body switches into a prolonged state of sympathetic atonia. So it's like a fight or flight phase, right? And so now our blood pressure is increasing, our blood vessels dilate, we're just given all the energy to get through that scenario, to survive that conflict, to resolve it. So that's what happens. Cellular adaptations happen on the organ level at that point. And so whatever is required to better assist the organs to help you cope through a conflict, that's what will happen. So in Dr. Hamer's case, for the testicular cancer, it was the germ cells within his testicles that actually started to proliferate. So create more of, so that he would have a better chance of having another child, of getting his wife pregnant. So nature has already basically set you up for, it's already trying to resolve the conflict for you. So he lost his son. Okay, what happens in nature if there's an offspring lost? You are going to be able to have another one right away by the cellular changes that happen within the testicles. And so it's already endowed within us. We don't have to think about it. Nature has it under control. And so this is going to enhance the function of his reproductive abilities. Now, this is the biological resolution to losing an offspring. But for us humans, we don't live biologically, do we? We're very far from living a biological life. So in nature, it's no problem. They can reproduce, the animals in nature can reproduce. That would have been the conflict resolution, and your body goes back into a normal state. But, Dr. Hamer wasn't at the age where he wanted to have another child, nor was his wife. And so his resolution didn't come in that way, although the body was very prepared to resolve that for him. So you can just see how nature, you're already endowed with this wisdom. These biological responses happen at the moment that your psyche perceives an event. And we don't know how our psyche perceives it until we have symptoms. And that's the cool thing is we can't predict how would we perceive a conflict. In that moment, you're not thinking, oh my God, this is a conflict. And okay, because I lost my son, it's definitely going to be a loss conflict. It could be a separation conflict. It could be feeling stuck, that he hadn't the ability to move and help him at the time. He could have perceived it any way, but it's a very subconscious split second perception of, and everybody's unique in the ways that they perceive. So any questions with that first law? I know it's a lot, but
I've like, seriously, my notes are crazy. I don't know if you can see this because I had my original question. I'm adding and adding and adding more questions. There's so many different things to add about. But okay, so people go through a lot of shocking events. Does that mean that every single time that is causing a lesion on the brain and there's something going on that they're not perceiving? Because knowing this information, if you know that you need to resolve it, even though you can prepare for the event, that could be very helpful. But people that don't, like, does it? So I know 100% of the time these things were found when somebody was diseased, let's say, quote unquote. But does that mean that every time there's a conflict, there will be an occurring lesion and there will be an occurring psyche? Well, of course, our psyche is going to perceive it in some way, and there will be a biological adaptation, because for some, that sounds like it could be crippling for some people. People live crazy lives.
Yeah, it is a really good question. And there is a distinction there. A DHS, in order to start a biological program, so instead of seeing this as a disease now, we call it, Dr. Hamer calls them a biological program. So in order for that to be initiated and for cellular changes to happen, 3 criteria have to be met. So it has to be unexpected, it has to catch you off guard, it has to be isolated felt, and highly acute dramatic. So if one of those are not met, then no, you do not start a biological program. And that's kind of nature's way to also protect you as well, because can you imagine if it was any little shocking thing that would start a biological, it would be crippling. You're right. So instead, no, it has to be these 3 criteria in order to begin a special biological program.
So, okay. So sometimes like people, because I'm in the health world too, and I'm talking to a lot of people, and they'll have some serious situations. And so I'll just say, did something happen at some point in time that you didn't expect? I always ask these questions, but a lot of times the answer is no, that they can't really think of anything. So what is the time lag? Like for him, it was months. Could it be something that happened in childhood that manifests as an adult? Or like, what generally is the appearance of they know that something has occurred?
Well, on the symptom level, usually the symptoms, like Dr. Hamer didn't know he was growing a tumor within the testicles at that time, because there virtually is no symptoms. It's not until the healing phase that most of our symptoms come for most of the programs. There are programs where you will get symptoms while you're conflict active, but yes, it's instantly, as soon as someone has experiences a DHS, there's going to be cellular adaptations right away. The thing that gives it away is being so aware of your body, is knowing when you're in a fight or flight in your nervous system. So are you sleeping at night? Do you have an appetite? What are you obsessively thinking about? What have you compulsively talking about that you cannot get over? If you can witness yourself in the sympathetic state, in this fight or flight, then you can very well determine, okay, there's a chance that I could be conflict active right now. And usually people know. We're not talking about just day in and day out stress, day-to-day stress at work. We're talking highly acute levels of not eating. People know if they're not sleeping, there's disrupted sleep patterns, and they're not really eating, maybe they're losing weight. This is a good indication that you're conflict active. And so let's figure out what the heck, what you're compulsively thinking about. But this is why CT scans are such an imperative diagnostic tool, because you can tell from a CT scan right off the bat whether you're in a conflict active phase, or if you're now healing, if you've resolved the conflict and now it's healing. They look different. They look different in each phase. And so it's very hard to get CT scans though, without it is. That's the part that really is is too bad, which is why I really want to begin training with reading CT scans and getting a CT scan, like getting a computer tomography, so that we can, as a community, open it up and have access so easily, because this really is the only diagnostic tool that Dr. Hamer used after this. I think he did use blood tests as well, but by far the CT scan was the go-to, because it's the literal proof right then that he could take somebody's CT scan and know their hormone status and their handedness and be able to give them a complete medical history just from that amount of data. So it's incredible.
Amazing. And so the part that's so the part that we'll see biologically, the adaptation, is associated with the part, the brain, like it's associated with the embryology, is it not? Where the developing
It is.
and that
Yes.
the brain controls that part of the body.
Yeah, that's the third biological law. So we can keep going down that.
But okay, let's go to the next one then.
Okay, sure. So the second biological law is all about the two phases, that every so-called disease or special biological program runs in two phases, provided that there is a resolution to that conflict. So we've got that conflict active phase where your body is in that fight or flight, right? That prolonged sense of sympathetic tonic state. And then afterwards, we have that healing phase. So there's two separate phases, very distinct. And in that healing phase, that's that vagatonia state where you're rest and digest now. And everything, all of the tissues that adapted to help that organ function at its best, well, now the reverse happens. And so if it was cell proliferation, like in Dr. Hamer's case, to increase the testosterone and the ability for him to conceive another child, well, then that all of those, that tumor growth is now going to be decomposed in the healing phase. And so this is where bacteria comes in. It's that's the fourth biological law. So we'll speak on that a little bit down the road, but yes, it's those two phases, so very distinct. And again, we can tell when we're in the conflict active phase by just being very aware of our nervous system. So these are really, really key factors we want to get into. Also, another good indication right off the bat is if you have cold hands and cold feet. This is called the cold phase, that first phase where, because your blood vessels are constricted, your limbs, your extremities are going to be quite cold. And so when shaking someone's hand, right away, you can identify, what is their nervous system? What state are they in right now?
As you move have cold hands and feet though for years and years and years. Like that's just you think that's just their way. So have they been doing, so what does that mean?
Well, it depends. It depends on, if we're talking day in and day out stress, and a lot of people are more sympathetic, that's the state they usually live in, well then they could have cold hands and feet all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're in a conflict active phase that entire time. So there's a little bit of a different, like a distinction there, but it's just getting to know your nervous system, how, what upsets you, what gets you really into this phase where you're losing sleep, you're not eating, you're compulsively thinking about something, and are very stressed, not just day in and day out, but just there's something happened. You've just gone through something and you need to address it. And that second phase, as you move into that second phase, there's a turning point of that phase, that in-between phase, and that's the resolution. So somewhere down the line, Dr. Hamer, he's resolved that conflict of that profound loss. He had to come into on a level of acceptance, like this is what happened, and now his mind was wrapped up in these discoveries and trying to get these discoveries into mainstream. And so he was dealing with this, and in so dealing with that, he brought himself into a resolution phase, into this healing phase. And so those extra tissues were decomposed with the help of tubercular bacteria, and this is where symptoms come in strong. So there's night sweats, there's this is when you have pain and inflammation, there's all the quote unquote illnesses and sicknesses and diseases. This is the phase that they come into. And so really it's our bodies.
Doctor, right? Because it's the scary part. People go
Exactly.
to the doctor and then and what do? They stifle it all.
Right. And without knowing, their bodies naturally moved
Right.
into that restoration process. So it is, yeah, we interrupt our healing phases all the time. This is what we're kind of conditioned, and that's just the whole narrative. Yeah.
Right. And what was I going to say? But the healing part can be dangerous, can it not? It can induce some pretty serious complications with that
Mm-hmm.
inflammation, and so there like if you're in the know of what's going on, are there protective measures that you can take to make sure that it doesn't, because it can be very painful, it can be very dangerous, it can do some pretty severe symptoms. So is part of the awareness of German new medicine to help mitigate the severity of that?
Well, yeah, the knowledge itself, if you know that you've been in a conflict, and your conflict active phase currently, you know you've just gone through something, this is where radical responsibility comes into play, because you know that your healing phase is going to be very proportionate in duration and intensity as your conflict active phase. And so if you are like conflict active for a few months and it's like constant conflict activity in and day out, you can expect a very, prolonged healing phase. And so symptoms will be severe, and it can be scary. So just the knowledge is what Dr. Hamer called really the therapy in itself, because it's your responsibility now. If you cannot resolve this conflict, it is your responsibility to downgrade it, to start finding a way to reframe how you're seeing it, to start seeing how you can kind of move yourself from being in this really heightened state of panic into a more like, there's going to be ways we can ask people for help. There's ways we can, if we can't resolve it, we can downgrade it. And then so moving into that, symptoms, yes, can be super scary. But again, when you know this, the fear is removed from the equation. And that is a huge, huge thing. When you have fear around symptoms, it exasperates everything.
Totally.
So on a symptomatic level, you can use the therapies that don't interrupt, ideally wouldn't interrupt the healing phase. So you don't want to be using stimulants, but ice packs are like a necessity. So we have ice packs in our freezer, and those are non-negotiables. Like if you have a headache or if you've got symptoms, you got to get ice pack on your brain, because there's swelling at the level of the brain. So healing happens in a fluid environment. And so it's an edema, it's a water edema on the level of the organ that's being restored, but also at the level and the area in the brain where that hammer focuses, there's a pocket of water on that area as well, as a protective mechanism while it's undergoing those tissue changes as well. And so that pocket of water, if it was a severe conflict, it can be quite large, and it causes a lot of headaches, a lot of severe symptoms, uncomfortable symptoms as well. So yeah, if you can use any sort of therapy that you feel comfortable using that ideally wouldn't interrupt the healing phase, like, antibacterial or antibiotics, something like that, that actually takes away the bacteria, because the bacteria is actually there to restore the tissues, and get rid of the tissues that don't no longer need to be there. But in Dr. Hamer's, like from what I've read from him and his students, is about 94% of the cases in any sort of disease, we're talking cancers, leukemia, all across the board, 94%, you don't need any intervention whatsoever.
Okay.
It's only on it's very case by case basis, whether you've got several conflicts running at one time and have gone into the healing phase. And when things become really severe is when we have the kidney collected tubule program running, where it's water retention. And so the swelling in the healing phase becomes way, way more intense. This can cause some severe complications that may need intervention. But for the majority of Dr. Hamer's cases, and he's had over 40,000 case studies, 94% of those needed no medical intervention whatsoever.
Right. He died recently, yes?
2017.
Okay. Yeah. And just a side note, how well was this received into the world of pharma and medicine, and what And then we'll go back to the laws, but just quickly, what do you have to say around that?
Oh, his discoveries and getting them
Yes.
to be mainstream. Yeah, they weren't well accepted at all, as you would understand why, Sasha. He was imprisoned twice. He was exiled. He was basically on the run ever since 2000, ever since 19, like the end of late 1980s. He was being ridiculed. His life he had major life attempts, you know, it was just horrific. He had his medical license stripped and his practice closed down, and it was very, very tough. And, you know, although he had some formal validations with his work from medical professionals and institutions, they were never recognized formally at the government level where it could be introduced into the universities. And we know why. Like, it literally, all of the medications, like probably 95% of what we get prescribed would have no longer a use for. So it would literally change the medical narrative, the medical industry and complex altogether.
Yes.
So yeah, the laws were suppressed, and they still really are suppressed. They're very, very protected.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And so number 3, that was the first 2, correct?
Yeah. Yep. First 2.
Number 3.
So number 3 is all about, like you were saying, embryology. So it's the science of embryology. And, you know, about 2 weeks after conception, the embryo breaks up into blastocysts. Okay. And this is where 3 embryonic germ layers are formed. And this is basically, within these 3 germ layers, they form the entire complete human body. So including all the organs and tissues and cells. And so they're divided into the oldest tissue group, which is the endoderm, which is controlled from the brainstem. So all of these tissue groups have a very specific brain control relay. And this is the cool science of it. So the oldest tissue group is controlled from the oldest part of the brain, which is the brainstem. Then there's the middle tissue group that was formed next. It's the mesodermal. So there's an old mesodermal tissue group and a new mesodermal tissue group. And these are formed from the tissue, or the brain relay, the cerebellum and the cerebral medulla. And then there's the youngest tissue group, which is the ectoderm, and it's controlled from the youngest part of the brain, the cerebral cortex. And so this is the cool thing about the science of the embryology is Dr. Hamer, I have this book here. This is the scientific chart of German new medicine. And you can see these 3 colors. These are the 3, they indicate the 3 germ layers. So, you know, this is the yellow group. He differentiated. It was the endoderms, the oldest germ tissues, and they're all controlled from the brainstem. This is the mesodermal group, the orange group. And the red group is the cerebral cortex group. And so all you have to do is you could look up the area of the brain, and that's where the Hamer focus would show up for someone that had experienced a conflict that affected the ectodermal tissue. So it's all laid out in these color differentiations, which helped me learn this material, because for me, the 3rd biological law was by far the most confusing. But the colors helped. And so when you kind of get to study, you know, which part of the brain is controlled from, you know, which organs fit into which group, is it the yellow group? And if it's the yellow group, then you know it's the brainstem. And if it's the brainstem, you know how these tissues are going to be affected biologically. There's always going to be cell proliferation in these tissues, in all of these tissues.
Oh, all of them.
In all of the yellow tissues. And if we're talking about the orange tissue group and the red tissue group, there's always going to be cell ulceration. So tissue loss during the conflict active phase. So our tissues, they behave differently based on what tissue group they're from. So that's the 3rd biological law. The 4th biological law is all about, you know, the beautiful microbes, you know, our system of microbes, and how, you know, lately, and what we had just gone through over the last 3 years, you know, you could see this all playing out, and it was all a very sad narrative. But all of those beautiful bacteria that are seen as invaders and dangerous to our bodies, that attack our own cells, well, I think nature has it figured out, and nature would never never attack itself. And so it's the understanding that the bacteria, whether it's fungi, whether it's tubercular bacteria, whether it's viruses, even if Dr. Hamer still didn't know whether they existed.
I don't think
he could never, up to all of his studies, never prove
They've
that.
never been proven. It was actually
Right.
proven in a court of law in Germany that measles is not caused by a so-called, this podcast is gonna get censored off YouTube, but whatever. I keep picking them off one by one, but we know that, right? It's already been proven in a court of law. And then by extension, because every other disease that's been, they use the same data to support it. So measles was
Yes.
to not be ever proven to be caused by that. So that means everything. It's, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And Dr. Hamer did say if they did exist, they would serve a very important role, just like all the bacteria. They would not be there to attack us and to, to be killing our own cells within our body. So they actually are, you can look at bacteria all along the line, all across the line, as nature's cleanup crew. That's really what they are. They are like the firefighters at the scene of a fire. Conventional medicine really deems bacteria as the culprits and the cause of a lot of so-called diseases and infections, but that would be like saying the firefighters caused the fire. They're there to clean up the mess. They're there to help restore the damage, right? Well, that's what bacteria is.
Yes. Yes. So what do you say to someone that has a raging infection and then they take antibiotics and it's painful and it's sore and it looked like they've got a big red line coming up from a cut and then they take antibiotics and it goes away and they're a lot better? Like,
yeah.
What do you say to something like that?
Yeah, well, it does. The antibiotics will stop the symptoms because it's literally getting rid of the bacteria. Now, the bacteria will produce those symptoms because if you think of just a cut, how the cut naturally heals itself is there's going to be redness and puffiness, inflammation, pain. Well, that's the work of bacteria. That is, you can literally see, you can't see them if you, obviously not with your naked eye, but you can see it going to work. It's producing the symptoms that heal and restore the tissue. So when you take an antibiotic, you're actually taking out what is causing the healing itself. So the symptoms go away, and when they get off the medication, typically it starts up again. The symptoms come back because the healing process wasn't completed. So yes, people, if they want immediate relief. It's painful, have an infection, quote unquote infection. It's painful and no one likes it. And so they'll take a antibacterial or antibiotic and they get that immediate relief. But what they're not understanding is they've literally interrupted that natural process. And so when they go off of it, it has to finish. It has to complete itself. I was going to say, there is one thing. Sometimes if you have a really, really intense healing phase and you've got infection and it's bad. I say infection, but because this is the terminology that, conventionally we know. But infection is seen as, we have to see it as something different. We have to see it as the natural healing process. If someone is going through a really, really severe healing process and the quote unquote infection is unbearable, you can take antibiotics for momentary relief to give you that relief so you can manage through the process, but never use it as a long-term thing. Like if you need relief, you absolutely need relief, slow down that microbacterial activity to help you just get the symptoms a little bit more manageable for a time being. Then if you choose to do that, that's fine. But understand what you're doing and why the symptoms are going away, and realize that it'll still need to complete the healing phase. So you're going to have to deal with the symptoms regardless. But knowing that those symptoms are healing, you're already well on your way to healing. It's completing the process.
So what if you use, for example, colloidal silver, colloidal copper, ozonated olive oil on something on the surface, and it is that also disrupting the healing? Because feel that there's a different frequency with that. Like, is that going to disrupt the healing? Is that going to cause a problem? Because I've used that many times to keep something quote unquote clean, so that, and then it heals just fine. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I think you're right with the frequency. It is all frequency. And so it does make a difference. Colloidal silver, I've used in the mouth if we have sores or something, just because if it hurts so bad, and you are kind of a way sloughing off some of the bacteria, but it's not a chemical, right? It's so in a way you are interrupting a little bit of the healing phase, but it's not taking a chemical, and you understand that there's a process, there's a natural healing process going on. And so yeah, I think it has to do with the frequency of the colloidal silver and the olive oil. If therapy makes it more bearable, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Okay.
This is how I look at it, is if you want to use essential oils, if you want to use homeopathy, if you want to use Bach remedy, what is that doing to the psyche? Is that bringing you some sort of relief? Well, then it's okay. And I guess a lot of the times, if we're talking medically and using antibiotics, for a lot of people that is emotionally bringing them relief, and that's why it helps so well too. So we have to look at it not just on the level of the symptom, but on the level of the whole, the psyche, the brain, and the organ. And because a conflict begins at the level of the psyche, because it's a split-second perceived subconscious perception, well, that's where it all begins. So it has to end at that level too. That's where it has to come into a resolution. And so for some people, taking a medication, that is the resolution, because that's the only narrative they know. That's the only paradigm they're aware of. So I have a lot of compassion for people who feel they need these things. They need the antibiotics and stuff, because that's their paradigm. And that's what creates a resolution in their minds at the level of the psyche. So it's just helping people understand it's a new paradigm of thinking. And if you understand that bacteria is actually a very meaningful friend, and it serves a very important role, then you begin to not see the need for those anymore. It completely changes your paradigm.
Right. Okay. So that was going to be a question that I had for in later, like using homeopathy, using like flower remedies, using whatever. Is that going to suppress the emotional healing? Because it'll help the psyche in that moment with that actual thing. But like the real resolution, is it not to do with resolving what caused it in the first place, the actual shock, the conflict shock from the beginning? Like so there's the resolution of, okay, oh my God, I'm scared, like this is freaking me out right now because my body's going through this. But then there's also the resolution of the conflict shock that happened that caused it all in the first place. And so it's not interrupting, they can all be done at once kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're right. Like it does. It requires a resolution, requires a level of a biological solution, right? A lot of times we're unable to make biological solutions. We're like Dr. Hamer, he wasn't going to have another child. So there had to be some way this could become resolved. For him, it was a matter of getting involved in this groundbreaking research, right? His mind was all over it. But it brought some relief to the level of the subconscious, the psyche. So if someone wants to use Bach remedies to bring relief to the subconscious mind, that's wonderful, because it helps you look at the situation differently. Because often it's how we perceived it in the first place that makes it a problem, right? It wouldn't have been a conflict if we didn't perceive it as a conflict. So if we can change and reframe how we see it, then it's no longer, it can come into a resolution a lot easier. So some of those therapies are very useful in that way.
So what about candida? That's a big issue for a lot of people. What is that? Is that coming in to clean something? Because a lot of people have chronic candida or cyclical hormonal association. So since we're on the microbe thing, how
candida is the healing phase.
But whenever you have all the time or cyclical, what does that mean?
It means that it's hanging healing. It's what Dr. Hamer called hanging healing. So the resolution, it never really came to a complete resolution. And now there's tracks that were established by the subconscious mind as warning signals. So at the moment you have this split-second subconscious shock, right? Your mind becomes, the subconscious mind is highly aware. It's just this heightened awareness. And so all the senses become acutely aware. And so the things that you would never perceive consciously, like the mold in a room or something, your subconscious mind is picking up everything, literally everything at that moment, because it's like a protective mechanism, right? That's what nature is. And so at that moment, all of these things that are recorded as significant in your environment will be stored at the level of the subconscious as tracks. And so when you come into a track, let's say you walk into a room and it has mold, you're not consciously aware of the high level of mold in it, the mold spores, but if your subconscious picks that up, that's a track. That's the thing that says, hey, look, last time you were around this heightened level of mold spores, this is what happened. And so it sets your body back into a very quick relapse of a conflict activity, the whole phase, the two phases. So conflict activity and then a conflict healing phase. And anytime we get into that healing phase, we've got that bacteria ramping up, cleaning up, getting in. And so a lot of, for candida in the intestines, the intestines have to do with the indigestible morsel conflict. So can't digest something, can't stomach a situation, just you can't accept something. And so if this is reoccurring, and this because due to tracks, or the conflict hasn't been complete resolved because maybe it's to do with your work and you're working every 5 days a week, well, this is just an ongoing track, right? You're never ever resolving the main conflict, and so you have chronic candidas. And so it's just constant repair phase, because you're going in and out of conflict activity and healing. Hang and healing is what Dr. Hamer called it. So
you take the supplement and you change your lifestyle, for example, because sometimes it feels like you do something and it works and it makes it go and it goes away. But I don't think, but maybe there isn't any other conscious resolution in any other level. Because sometimes I take things, they got lung stuff going on. I have a lung story actually. But there's and then, take some mullein and that symptom is gone. And it's like, okay, it's good. It didn't take but I know the lungs have to do with a death right, I think, right? A death right conflict. But so we don't have to get into that right. But sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I took my tincture and it's good. And there was no other resolution that was worked on. Does that get because I always tell people there's more than one way to heal. Like I feel like, but if there's no work done, how does that resolve the conflict if the symptoms are gone?
Well, it's all on the level of the psyche, right? So in some way that is bringing resolve to the other level of the psyche. Now, changing the way we perceive something, that causes a resolution right then and there. And it doesn't even have to be a conscious resolution. Usually our resolutions are unconscious. They happen without us even knowing. Like you say, we shift something in our life, we shift the way we think about something, and that causes a resolution. So that plays a role in it. We have to, again, look at the individual as the three components. We can't look at one part of it and not include the other parts.
Okay. So that's the microbes, and that's a big one. I mean, that we could go on forever and ever and ever, but okay, so we'll just get the law done. Okay, so now number 5.
Yeah, and so number 5 is all about, the reiteration that, nothing in nature is diseased. So every so-called disease is just part of a beautiful biological program created by nature to assist you in coping with the conflict. So it's all for your survival. And really the 5th biological law is the quintessence of GNM. It's, if there's any law you should know, well, they're not one more important than the other, but if you know the quintessence that every so-called disease, every symptom, no matter what it is, even psychosis, it's all part of a special program of nature that is designed literally to help you cope and survive, because nature is all about survival, about procreation, about thrival.
Okay. Okay. So that's okay. So my question now is, at what point, because you could turn around, I could poison your drink and you won't know anything and you'll drink it and you could get really sick and die, or not die, but just get really sick. Like, at what point does poisoning in the environment, really bad dietary habits, really bad, like there's the poison, there's the nutrient deficiencies, like does the lack of nutrients affect the capacity to heal in that healing phase? At what point does modern life, because we are sicker now than ever before, no question about it, like people are just sick on all, like you just see them, like even the way people walk, like the way they, like everything is just affected, in my opinion. And so at what point does fluoride in the water matter? Or like, doesn't it? Like, we could poison someone and make them sick. We could, we could take a very important nutrient out of their body and make them sick. So at what point is it the conflict, or is there? And at what point is modern life and all the poison and lack of nutrients?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these laws of nature, if for poison, for injury, for severe malnutrition, it doesn't require you to have a DHS. If you're poisoned, yes, you're going to have symptoms. You're going to have adaptations within the body, and that doesn't require a conflict shock. So we have to understand that, yes, being poisoned, having severe malnutrition, or being physically injured, they are outside of the scope of these laws. So they do not require a DHS.
Right.
So poisons do play a role. They interrupt the beautiful biology, the mechanisms that nature has endowed in us. So yes, there's a certain amount of poison that we can endure. Our bodies are very, they can endure a lot, as you know. And so there are a certain amount of poison that anybody, and poisons, you could have too much water and that could be considered a poison. It's literally too much of anything can start really interfering with our biological processes. So it's just a matter of not being fearful of them, because we're exposed to poisons and EMFs, like literally, like you said, our life right now, we're surrounded by poisons. It's in all of the foods if it's not organic, and it's just everywhere. So the thing is, take the fear out, because our bodies can endure so much. So yes, if we're nutrition a little bit nutrition deficient, well, that's not going to cause disease, but it could cause some symptoms. So we have to learn to trust that we're not looking for things outside of us to worry about. We're actually want to be in our inner world and really identify what triggers us, what makes us our blood pressure increase. What are the things that have our mind occupied and are stealing our peace? These are the things we want to be concerned with, not outside poisons, not looking to, do everything the right way and to be the most clean eater, because that can be the thing that's stealing your peace and causing all these conflicts as well. So it's finding a balance, knowing that you can trust your body. Your body has everything it needs, no matter if there's poisons in the food you eat. No one is eating that amount of poisons in our food where we need to be worried. Honestly, we're not. If that was the case, a lot of us would be passing away because of the amount of toxins in our food right now.
But they are sick. People are sick. Right. And they've put themselves there. When you go to a hospital, which I hope to never walk into one ever again, but you look at the people, you just look at the state of the people, they put themselves there. Most people, not everyone, of course, but most people through their habits have put themselves there. They cannot get to that shape, or, they're sitting there with their pole and their whatever they're attached to, smoking outside, I feel like they put them, but there's probably a lot of other things that led to them having their habits too, right? Like you said, you can't you can't divide it all because it's such a big thing. There's a lot of self-loathing out there and self-sabotage as well. So it's just, I just wonder at what point, like, I feel like for some people say that, you know, is not the food, is not the food. And I get that. I certainly choose to eat food from farmers that actually care about me and care about, you know, because I think it just supports everything. It's win-win for all. But at what point, I don't know. I just feel like it's like, how does GNM explain the level of increase of sickness in the population these days?
Yeah, well, just think of what we're going through right now. Think of the level of propaganda. Think of the scope of the narratives that we're listening to and exposed to on a daily basis. They've never been this prolific in history. And now we have every person and their dog has a phone that they can be exposed to at every given moment. Headlines and horrific stories. So we've never been exposed to the amount of conflicts that we have in the past. So we have to start correlating the emotional components, start making those correlations that we're just having way more conflicts than we used to have. Think of back when people used to live in tribes and in small communities. You worked together as a tribe. There was a safe place for everybody. There was a place that everyone got to speak up. There was a place that you felt comfortable and confident. You had a role. You were never outed unless, you know, it was a huge deal if you were a danger and a threat to your tribe. That was the only reason you were outed. Otherwise, you belonged. Now we're all on our own. You know, women are encouraged to like go out and you know, be that boss woman, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's no, like, it's all the messaging, it's all the conditioning that we are being bombarded with. The societal framework that we live in is completely opposite to how nature is basically endowed in us, in the workings of living biologically. So the height in the increase of sickness, so-called sickness and disease, is due to our modern way of living. It's everything opposite than what it biologically should be.
Right. And I can see that actually causing problems in young children just because, you know, the nuclear family, it's like not even just the nuclear family. I mean, of course, there was that extension of that when we did live more in a tribal setting, in a bigger community setting. But then there's also just the fact that mom's not at home, you know, feeding you something when you get home and being there if you had something to deal with. And, you know, even that basic support, and that, because my mom, when I was young, my mom was at home. She stayed home once us kids were born. And I didn't realize it then, but I know now how safe that made me feel. Like I'd come home, there'd be food, she was there, she could take care of me. And that gives you this unconscious knowing that everything's going to be okay because I'm going to go home and my mom's going to be there to take care of me if I need it, right? So there's that big thing. But how do you explain a very young child and their illness? Is there something that happened in the womb? Is there something like, what is with that? Like there's young kids, there's kids that aren't forming properly in the womb, or there's babies that are ill. And let's take out these things that they're sticking in their arms. And that's, I mean, there's some direct poisoning if there's ever been any, right? So let's, like, removing that out of there. How do you explain childhood cancers? How do you explain in the young ones that really haven't had much of a life experience? How does German new medicine apply there?
Well, because everything everyone has a psyche, even an embryo. There is a subconscious. There is that energetic field of awareness, and that's all it requires in order to perceive the world around them. So an embryo, a fetus within a womb, can experience a severe, if the mom is going through something severe, or loud deafening noises around the womb, you know, anything that's going on in the external, that fetus absolutely can pick it up. And that's typically what happens if a baby is born with something, or young children as infants, they can definitely have DHSs in the same way that a fetus would. it's the experiencing on the level of those three, of the organ, brain, and the psyche. It's all impacting, and it impacts a child, an adult, an animal in the same way across the board, because it's nature.
Right. Okay. Okay. So it just applies no matter what. Basically,
It applies.
the laws are the laws. So, okay, I got to sift through my questions here because I've got a lot of. Okay. So what is the definition of a symptom of GNM? Because say somebody has a tumor, that to me is a symptom, but it's not like, but that's not really, that's say the result of the conflict. But the symptom, I think, to me, I understand is the dissolution, like say they're getting rid of blood and pus and whatever else, black stuff they're coughing up out of their lungs or something. That is more what referred, like what is the definition of a symptom in GNM as opposed to something that's just kind of just sitting there? Is there a distinction made with that? How do you like?
I don't really know if there's a distinction. I mean, a symptom we just look at differently in a different context than a conventional, narrative of a symptom.
Okay.
So symptom as dysfunction, malfunction, something not right, something gone wrong. Well, in German New Medicine terms, it's a symptom is a biological process. It's a logical adaptation causing a symptom. So I think a symptom is a symptom regardless. It's just how are we looking at it? From what lens are we seeing this? From what paradigm are we looking at that? Maybe that didn't answer your question, and maybe
the tumor isn't looked at as a symptom, right? It's more the symptoms are arising when that's being dissolved.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, as it's being dissolved, then that will produce symptoms like discharge and pain and swelling and absolutely coughing up if it's in the lungs.
Right. Okay. So got that. Oh my goodness, I have so many questions all over the. Oh, so one of my biggest area of focus, well, that's not true. I have a few areas of focus. I'm really, let's say from more the physical perspective in the body, my biggest focus is minerals. So say somebody's mineral deficient, and I think that's one of our big deficiencies because the glyphosate they're spraying everywhere is chelating minerals, killing the microbes, doing all these things. So if from a GNN perspective, will the capacity to heal fully be hindered by the lack of those minerals?
Yeah, to a certain extent it will, because that's kind of how, as we were talking about before, how it begins to hinder the biological processes is the poisons and the lack of minerals. Yeah, it does cause some disruptions. When we do eat healthy and we decide to eat clean and we decide to, just treat our bodies with respect, we're doing so because it gives our body the energy and the vitality it needs when it comes time to have these biological processes happening. And so when we lack a certain amount of minerals, just probably because of our diet, then yeah, it can interfere and play a role in that.
Right. Okay. I just want to share a quick little thing that I had happen not too long ago. And I think your brother was supposed to be down because I met him at a product training dinner thing a while ago. And then he was supposed to come to this other one, but it snowed that day. So I'm driving home that night here in Calgary. The roads were terrible because it's really slippery underneath. And I drive home, and between me getting home, where I started and getting home, there was, first of all, there's blocking because there's an accident, but then there's another one. It was just I just wanted to get home. There's another car that's facing the wrong way in the opposing lane, and they had to turn around. But then as I'm coming around the corner of this one major road, this car just went smash into this barrier and sparks flew, and it was big. I was like, what the heck is going on? I couldn't really see it because there's a car right in between us blocking it, but I could see the sparks fly and I heard the crash. It was just shocking. And so I get home, I was like, oh, just get me home already. This is ridiculous. And it just felt really weird that night. So the next day I'm going along my day, and all of a sudden I feel my lungs, and I'm like, oh, and I just recently known that the whole death right thing with the lungs. So it's like, oh, that's it. Because normally I'd go for my hurts. I'd go for my things, right? I'm like, oh, wait a second. What death right? I'm like, oh, and I thought about, the day before. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And I just started talking to myself. I'm like, snow's gone. You're totally safe. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's no danger here. It's all gone. No problem. And and literally 2 minutes later, it just totally went away, never came back.
See, Sasha, that is it. That's the quintessence right there, is the knowledge of that, being able to make the emotional correlation with what you went through. Like it's amazing. And that is the responsibility that you got to step into. That's the role that we're actually all called to do. And that's health freedom. You don't, even if you didn't have your herbs,
Right.
like they weren't the solution. They
I
weren't
didn't
going
take
to,
them. I didn't.
right. The solution was at the level of the psyche.
Right.
So it's having that correlation. And I love that example. I have so many of those too, with just within our own family. Of as soon as you bring that to your conscious awareness and you just make that correlation, the symptoms are done. Like they fade away, because it's just like, oh, it's just amazing. It's so freeing.
It is. But now I have a question. Okay. So is there room for traditional Chinese medicine in this, Ayurvedic medicine in this, biofield tuning in this, right? Like, where are these long held traditions? Like the biofield tuning is more new, but the long held traditions of Ayurveda, the oldest medicine on the planet, Chinese medicine. So, from a Chinese medicine perspective, in the 5 element theory of Chinese medicine, the fall is lung season. And it's the organ that's basically on the clock for that season kind of thing. So it's the one, and this is where we see all these lung issues come up. So more often, more frequently. So how do we, I'm trying to align, the energy body with traditional medicine, with German new medicine, I'm just trying to see how do all these pieces of the puzzle with tissue salts is another really big thing that I love. Like, how do these all work together? And is there space for that in Germany medicine?
Well, I think if you were to ask Dr. Hamer, he would say no, because he was all about the biology. Like, these were biological findings, and biology is already set up, and it's always your body's working to already take care of the biological solution. And so his answer was resolve the conflict. Like, if it's a separation conflict and your spouse and you can't live together, why are you staying together? You have to separate and resolve the conflict. But for me, I'm a certified emotion code practitioner, and I use it alongside this because everything is energy, right? And if emotions are so correlated into this, which they are, well, then how can I use that to help, distill that energy, just to give a relief on the level of the psyche, right? And so I feel like there are those modalities that are very helpful. Sometimes there are situations where you don't want to be messing with certain long held conflicts. For example, if we're talking about the coronary arteries or the coronary veins, and you're dealing with like a conflict mass of years, you don't want to be doing anything to resolve that. Otherwise, it's going to be a fatal heart attack. So this is where you really have to know, when is therapy a good idea and when should you just allow them to be and be happy with that. But as far as like these old traditions, these held traditions, I like to think of it as it's all consciousness anyway. We all share this consciousness. And so if these long held medicine traditions are widely known within us, within a population, so a field of consciousness, and fall is the lung season, well, that just opens us up to experiencing conflicts associated in the same manner as everybody else would. This is what collective shocks are. Collective, when you have epidemics, so-called epidemics, or a whole school, right. Like my children's high school had like a whole, they said a mini epidemic, but that's a story we can get into later. But it's all within this consciousness, all dealing with a certain amount of a similar conflict scenario, but perceiving it in very similar ways because of similar conditioning, similar indoctrination, similar beliefs, similar values. And so we oftentimes will get similar symptoms because of that.
Mm-hmm. And so what about, say, seasonal allergies every spring? Is that a track?
It's a track.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So if someone has seasonal allergies and it only comes up in the springtime when the pollen count is high, then you know without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, that they would have experienced a DHS, a complex shock, when the pollen count was high, when the sun was, was around this temperature and the grass was just growing and the smell was in the air, because our senses are so highly picked, they're so highly acute at that moment in time, that split second moment. So
Right.
yeah, they become tracks. But if someone brings that to their conscious awareness, most of the time that's all it's required, and they're no longer have allergies, seasonal allergies.
Right. So what about, okay, allergies? Because I know you're talking about this on one of your podcasts not too long ago. You brought up peanuts, for example, the peanut allergy. And again, I know there's supposed to be a conflict associated with peanuts involved, but there's so many peanut allergies. There's so many, like when I was growing up, nobody was allergic. Everybody had peanut butter sandwiches. That wasn't a problem. There wasn't these nut allergies, these peanut allergies. How could everybody be having these conflicts on the ideas of peanuts?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. And that question comes up lost. It's think of, it's not that there's any less peanut butter out there. What is the common factor? What is there more of? There's more conflict activity. That's what it is. That we have to look at what we're being exposed to, what our children are being exposed to that they weren't being exposed to when we were kids. They don't have a phone. We didn't have a phone in our hands, growing up. We just didn't. We were not exposed to the level of conflict, the opportunity to experience so many damn conflicts as we are today. And that is the difference. It's the modern life. It's this life that is so far from biologically aligned that we're just exposed to more opportunity for conflicts, to experience conflicts. That's the difference. There's no less peanut butter.
There's no less peanut butter, but why is it all peanuts and not beef? Like why is it another protein containing food? Why is it peanuts? That's what I'm wondering. Why is it one specific food that seems to be more of a problem than other ones?
Right. Yeah, I don't know really. I don't know the answer to that really. Peanuts, they have there's a lot of mold in peanut butter, and maybe the psyche picks that up as a subconscious track as a danger element, where beef, for example, it's less toxic in that format, in that way. So maybe that has to do with it. But I've never really considered that from that point of view before, Sasha.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Okay. Good. I wanted to think about that. Okay. You answered that one already. Okay, how are we do for time? Okay, we got 10 minutes left. Okay, just a couple more, and then I know we're going to get into more specific things. So you guys, if you've got questions, if you have your own particular issues, start thinking about, look up Germany medicine and just look at what kind of a conflict that was, for example, right? Like that the indigestible morsel. I think that's even the thyroid. I had another thing with my thyroid. That was a really interesting one, but I won't get into that right now. But so another thing, so the work of Weston Price, right? Weston Price and conditions and all that.
Yeah.
So what he saw was the bone structure, the dental, like every hygiene and the capacity of the cavities, like one generation off the traditional foods, everything was falling apart. Now, do you think that's because there was other conflicts going on? Like, what's a cavity? That's one thing that I'm curious about is, how is a cavity helping someone? What's the biological adaptation there? Well, and that switch from that generation, it happens really quickly. Is it because everybody's conflicts, or? Yeah.
Well, a cavity belongs to the mesodermal group, the new mesodermal group, and that has to do with the biological significance of that particular program is always at the end of the healing phase. So it's to make the bones, the tissues, the ligaments, the joints, the muscles stronger. And so the cavity, that's a bone. So it's to literally make it stronger. So by the end of the healing phase, by the end of that, you've gone through the 2 phases, you actually have a more robust tooth than before. So you can bite. It's all about a bite conflict. the inability to bite, or not being able to, or not being allowed to bite back. So Weston A. Price's work has to do with the foods, right? The traditional foods. But if you look at when and where he was doing his research, there were a lot of them was the tribes, right? The tribal groups. And so think of that element. We have to take that into consideration, where everybody within that tribe and that beautiful community had a place, and they were safe to speak up if they needed to. There was always someone to go to, that elder to go to, and with your concerns, or if you had something you wanted to say, there was always a place you got to express that. But nowadays, in school, our children are told to shut up, sit down, raise your hand. You can't speak. Don't speak back to the teacher. Don't speak back to your friend. Don't say that. It's rude to say that. Be gentle with that. Like, all of it is this, you cannot bite back. You cannot say what you need to say. You cannot defend yourself. You're not allowed to. You're less than, your position is meager. So don't speak up, because you're not, at that level. So this is the component where you really get to see the laws play out in the bigger picture when you expand it and look at it from that perspective.
Okay. And it makes sense. That's the thing. It's just so easy to see the physical and the physical habits, but we don't know what's going on. We don't know how this change has been perceived by the person, right? So
Right.
we don't know that. And so is there any place where they are doing these CT scans where that is, like, are there other countries where they're actually adopting this and using this, and people have access to getting their cranial CT scans? Or
no, not to my knowledge. There's not, like, in a university setting or anything like that. Like, doctors in training are not learning this. They're not learning this at all. There are doctors who know it through, the work of Dr. Hamer and then his students. But it's all private now. Like, there's an individual in the States who you can get a hold of and get your CT scan read, but you first have to get a CT scan. There are countries where it's a lot easier, like the Philippines and India, where you can go in $30 and an hour later, no questions asked, you have it in your hand. So just in the West, it's really, really difficult. But I really hope to have some sort of role in helping that become a very accessible diagnostic tool for us.
that would be amazing if you could get something like that. That would be huge. That would be.
We're going to require a lot of funding, but it's
Right.
definitely possible.
Right, for sure. Okay, so we're almost done. So how can people, so you practice GNM. So how can people find out about you? What are the services you offer? How do you work with people? Let's find out that.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I don't like to say I practice it. I consult. I'm definitely not a German new medicine practitioner. I definitely, like, this is my jam. I study this, and I can't get enough of it. And I offer consults. I offer GNM consults where, if you have a question and you want to know, you want to help making that correlation, what the heck is it? What could this be from? Really helping you understand what the symptoms are and why they're there, and then helping you understand what it's going to look like, throughout the healing phase. I offer one-on-one consults. I also have an online membership community called New Perspectives, and it's a group of us. We're about 25 members now, and we meet twice every month, every other Monday, and we meet on Zoom just like this, and we go through our personal case studies. If we have friends and we want to know, like, what's going on, we just get into the science of this, and we kind of just geek out on all this material, and it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of bonuses and a lot of material involved in that membership. So
find out about that.
So you can go to tanyaverquin.ca. Okay. The membership right now, the enrollment is open twice per year, just because when we allow enrollment in, then we're all kind of starting at the beginning and we all are on the same page. And so I do that twice a year, so we just closed out our last enrollment. And so we'll be opening back up again after the spring and new enrollments coming. But I take one-on-one consults throughout the year. I have a calendar where, again, that's tanyaverquin.ca. You can access that calendar. And I also do one-on-one coaching where it's just, if you need the support, you need the person to help you through the program. If that's what you're working through, I offer that as well. And so that's more in depth, and it's every week working together one-on-one.
Right. And that's the thing so my husband's like, so ask her how this goes from something that's more interesting to useful, because G&M actually doesn't provide you the tools, right, for the release. Because so my husband's a coach as well. And the releasing, a lot of people are holding on tight to their stuff and they don't know how to, and they're like, I'm working on it, but they've been working on it for years and years and years and years. So I guess that's where, because G&M doesn't actually provide you with the tools for that. It's more the awareness. But then do other people like you bring in your own tools to help with resolving that?
Yeah, it's all about making those paradigm shifts, the way we see ourselves, the way we perceive ourselves has to be the thing that changes. Because if someone, for example, is dealing with a chronic issue, that means they've been seeing themselves the same throughout that entire process. Nothing has switched. As soon as we can change our self-concept, everything about the past changes. The way we think about it, the way we feel about it. And that is what it takes to completely shift out of a long-term ongoing chronic condition. So that's what I do with my one-on-one coaching, is just helping you change your self-perception and figuring out, because most people have a pattern. They tend to, and I think you might notice this in your life, but I can certainly notice this in mine, where I perceive things. If I do get a symptom of some sort, it's always usually the same type of symptom. It's always a digestive issue symptom. And that means I have this theme that I typically perceive conflicts in my life as indigestible morsels, right? This is how I perceive most things. So if I continue to perceive most things in this way, nothing really changes. But if I can change my self-concept, things begin to shift really quickly, and you begin to shift out of those chronic patterns of symptoms, because it's all based on chronic patterns of thinking and feeling.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. People are stuck in those patterns, right? So anything that we could do to get out of that. Okay. I know you have to go, so hold on for 1 sec, but guys, isn't this amazing? Like, this is what I love. The more that I delve down deep into the truth about health and wellness, we've been sold such a story about who we are, what this body is, how we get sick, how we heal. And so much of that is within us. I always tell people, before you get all those supplements, I think it's for number one thing, it's inside of here. And G&M is such an amazing tool. So check out Tanya, listen to her podcast, hook up with her for a consult if you want, be a part of your group. Like, there's G&M, I think it's incumbent on all of us to spread this information, right? Because it's been suppressed for so long. It's time that people know about this. And when I talk to people about this, and I talk about some certain things, and they got a particular situation, and then I talk about G&M and I enlighten them, they're just invariably, they're just fascinated by the whole thing. So
yes. And there's that resource. There's a brilliant resource, Sasha, that you can include in the show notes, is learninggnm.com.
Right.
And it's just incredible. It has an A to Z index search directory where you can type up the symptom, or look at the first letter of the symptom, and it'll explain through these laws in very detail what the conflict theme is, what you can expect during the conflict active phase, what kind of symptoms you can expect during the healing phase, and what it all kind of looks like.
And that's cool, because I think that'll help also allay some fears if they know, okay, if this is to come, this
Absolutely.
is what it look like, right?
Absolutely.
Healing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Okay, guys, isn't this amazing? Please share. Please give me go rate me on iTunes or wherever else, and just share this around. We got to share this around. It's time to own our health, because if we don't own our own health, somebody else will, and it's not going to be to our benefit. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until the next one, be well. Ciao.